Welcome to the Digital Marketing Insights podcast, brought to you by Brightside Digital.
Hi everyone, welcome to the show. I'm delighted to say today we have Noah, who's co-founder of Veryable and host of the Code Story podcast. Noah, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Tom. Thanks for having me today.
It's an absolute pleasure. Noah, can you tell our audience first and foremost a little bit about yourself, please?
Yeah, for sure. So I've been in technology for around 16 years now, 17 years. Been doing a mixture of corporate IT in the way back times, and then now latest doing startups. Ran my own agency for a while, a mobile development agency. Also a podcast host for around 3 years now, doing Code Story. Most importantly, I'm a follower of Jesus, and I am a husband and to my wife, and my 3 kids keep me really busy and exercised, so that's good through their activities. I'm also an outdoorsman. I'm very much more about the analog than I am digital, which is kind of foreign for an engineer. From in my experience, I like to hunt, I like to fish, I like to do all those things.
Yeah, I have a similar kind of lifestyle on the weekends. I try and get away from the screens a lot of the time if I can. Similar things, farming, but yeah, Noah, I think first question I'll ask you is how do you go about managing all those things, and how do you go about marketing and building Veryable and Code Story? And I suppose some of your past experiences could apply to both of those.
Yeah, sure. I appreciate that question. Juggling it all is can be challenging some days. I think the Lord made me in a way that I like spinning plates, which is valuable with all the things going on. I think that if I was to identify a cornerstone habit for me to that helps me to um, kind of manage it all is getting up early in the morning. I try to get up at 5. I try to get up and do some reading, do some checking in with myself and enjoying the quiet while everyone else is sleeping. So that's kind of my cornerstone habit to manage it all. And as far as when it comes to to Veryable and Code Story, so how do we market Veryable? It's interesting because manufacturing, distribution, warehousing, supply chain is an interesting space because you can't throw an ad on Facebook and tell them about what you're building. You really got to go to the place where they are, and where they are is a little more traditionally oriented around trade shows, and in their plants themselves. Most days just trying to survive, trying to get their orders out, trying to complete the tasks that they need to do on a day-to-day basis. So we do a lot of educating essentially on what we've built with Veryable, which is an on-demand marketplace for manufacturing and distribution labor. Where as a lame way to describe it, we're an Uber for the shop floor, right? We're Instacart for manufacturing labor for a shop floor worker, and um, how we've had to get in front of businesses is to go to those trade shows and to meet with them where they are in their plants. We go in their plants, we look at their operations, and being sort of in industrial engineering base, we look at their operations and we see where their problems are likely occurring based on how they are doing things. And we insert Veryable essentially. It's free to sign up. They can use it. It's a SaaS solution, but we educate them on how Veryable can help them in their operation. So that's the Veryable side of thing. Code Story wise, kind of a totally different industry. It's more engineering focused podcast, right? Podcast is obviously what we're chatting on right now. It's a different world. And how do I market that? I think that I have an email list. I have a website. I'm on all the directories, so that's covered as far as getting the word out or getting my show out and making it available. I try to do a decent amount to my email list. I try to do a decent amount to on like things like Podchaser and things of that nature. And then, I do some paid advertisements as well, and some strategic platforms that have proven valuable to grow my subscriber base. That's a little bit there on both of those things.
And do you think, looking at the podcast for a second, and we'll talk about the tech aspect, I'm guessing you take aspects and you apply it to your main business from time to time. And do you use sometimes learning, staying up to date in tech, I should put it? Do you find that kind of inspires you and helps you with your kind of discovery process of trying to improve your own things?
Oh, absolutely. I love it that you keyed in on that. There's such a it's such an interesting thing. When I started Variable, I was asking a lot of questions to CTOs, and we were having these types of conversations that I have on the podcast, peer CTOs. I'm CTO of Variable, and I was having these conversations. And when I was considering doing the podcast, I was like, I'm already talking to those folks anyway. I can just start recording them and and creating an asset for them too. But I learned so much from the conversations. I learned so much about you know around building just enough to get feedback, around really building a team culture and supporting your team and valuing your team and making your team feel valued, and and pushing a product into the market and scaling it, and all those lessons learned. I think what I learned the most from is sharing the mistakes that have been made. People get vulnerable with the mistakes of like, yeah, we really, this one thing is what comes to mind. Although we've made a ton of mistakes, this one thing comes to mind. And then, so for me, that gives me the opportunity to be like, okay, well, that's a learning I can take immediately from it. So 300 plus episodes in, I've got 300 plus mistakes that have been made that I can make sure and talk to my team about, and make sure we're not making the sort of same thing. So yeah, it's definitely helpful there.
And do you find people are forthcoming when you're asking about mistakes? How do you present that with the clients beforehand, especially?
Yeah, they are really, and I send a list of questions that I'm going to ask ahead of time, and then so they see that on there. They see it's going to be asked, and a lot of times they're like, "Man, this was a tough one." Not because there aren't any mistakes or that I don't want to talk about them, is that there's so many. There's so many mistakes I could talk through, and the goal of the show is to make them comfortable and to make them feel like we're in a coffee shop chatting as peers, and they're just kind of you know talking about what really happened, like what really went down, and that brings out the best conversations.
Brilliant. And do you have a campaign or something you did previously that you're really proud of, or how you made it successful?
Sure. I did. I started to do seasons, and when I started to do seasons, I started to bundle up things for sponsors in a different way, in a full sponsorship aspect and a full season sponsorship. Excuse me. And that was really helpful. Once I started actually bundling things into sponsorships, it allowed me to piece out how the show was monetized, and so that was really good. As far as growing the user base, though, Castbox has been a fantastic platform for me, for Code Story, in in and growing that subscriber base. I've thrown some ads on different platforms, and that one has really produced the results that has been really valuable to the show and to the show's numbers. So I continue to support that platform and send people to that platform because it's a great program. They're great people over there. It's a really great podcast app as well. So it's kind of good all around there. So I'm super proud to have sort of dug in and found that, because there's no silver bullet with podcasts, really. I mean, there's no silver bullet. You figure out what works for your show, and that's not always advertising. Sometimes that's putting it in front of people in creative ways, or going to, again, to the the trade show aspect, like being in front of people who like your content at perhaps not a traditional advertising medium, not on Facebook or not on XYZ. So, it's very different for each show. And I'm pretty proud to have found some things that have worked and helped move the needle.
Brilliant. Yeah, and that sounds fantastic. How do you find how did that scale when you implemented CastBot? How did it scale from there? Um, can you kind of
Sure.
reveal just in terms of the difference? You don't have to say numbers, but did you see a percentage increase or something?
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, I certainly can speak to that. I mean, my subscribers, 5x'd easily from advertising on Castbox, and I think I've done 3 campaigns. On I would say quarterly. It's a little longer than quarterly, but we'll just say quarterly for sake of example. And I've done that on a quarterly basis, and it's easily 5x my subscribers, which obviously, 5x is my plays. Whenever my episodes release, it gets the episodes into more people's ears. It's better exposure, and so I look for opportunities like that on different platforms. Castbox has been the best results.
Wow. And focusing on yourself for a second, in your day-to-day job, obviously we have several softwares on our computers that try and help our roles daily. Is there any you swear by and you use more regularly than often?
Great question. There is one tool that I am in every day. I manage 3 different inboxes in 3 different calendars, and it's Veryable, it's Code Story, and it's my personal one. And I use a tool called Shift, and I think the website is tryshift.io if I recall correctly. Um, it may not be .io, maybe .com, but it's called Shift, and it's basically for multiple. It's basically built for multiple email addresses, Google Drives, um, contacts and calendars across different accounts, but all in one workspace. And so I'm able to bounce between all my emails, keep them in separate inboxes because I like that. I like to have it in separate places rather than just all mixed together. But it allows me to have the same set of tools. I can flip just between accounts, respond to emails, do it quickly, and not have 100 tabs open. Well, we'll say 100 more tabs open in my browser. And so I swear by that one. It really helps a lot. The other thing for the podcast, the other tool I'll mention for the podcast, and happy to share this one. It's not a unknown tool, but it's Auphonic Leveler. So I use when I'm editing my podcast, I use Logic. Some people use Pro Tools, some people use Audacity. They're all pretty similar as far as just multi-tracking, especially when you're doing stuff in a podcast. But what really changes the game for me is Auphonic Leveler, and I will take each of my tracks after they're cleaned up and run them through Auphonic Leveler, and it levels the sound. It does a high pass filter, a noise and hum reduction. It sets it at the right 16 LUFS for podcasts, and it just really cleans up each of the audio pieces. And then I export the full episode, and then I run it through the leveler again, and just really it really simplifies the mixing and mastering process for me. And so I swear by that tool when I'm doing my podcast. I share it with everyone I can.
That's excellent advice. And away from your strengths, is there any particular areas you're looking to upskill yourself into and why? And the second part of that is, do you look at any particular websites or anything, books for insights and new information?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's a great question. I think I'm a permanent beta, so I'm always in progress. I'm always learning. I'm always trying to learn, and I kind of feel like I start eroding when I'm not learning. So I need a challenge. I need to be learning something new. For me, when I talk about upskilling, so for Veryable in particular, one thing I'm learning a lot right now is and have grown in a lot is growing organizations. My engineering team has grown from 3-4 people in the early days to now plus 20, moving into the 30s very soon. And then also growing a product organization and a design organization and a QA organization alongside engineering. And so all these things are brand new. And so for me to the thing I need to focus on is upskilling and my ability to design these organizations, appropriately based on what we're trying to accomplish. And that's been a challenge. It's been a lot more challenging than I would have even realized. I think sometimes engineers, I'm definitely guilty of this. We can see that the engineering aspect is actually the hardest part of building software, and a lot of times it's not. It's very building organizations, building teams, building team cultures, growing people is very fluid. It's very not black or white, and you have to be a good person, and you have to be a good problem solver, and you have to care about people and organizations to really make it work. You can't just sling code and get something to work. So that's been something I'm constantly looking to upskill. As far as the podcast, I'm still looking to upskill my marketing, my exposure. I feel good about the content I'm creating, but I don't feel like I have mastered getting the word out. I still am looking for new avenues to give people exposure to the show, get feedback, and really get the Code Story name out there.
I think that's actually a really good point you hit home. Just getting feedback. It's very hard to sometimes believe that at the end of the day, you're producing your show for listeners and to hopefully entertain and provide value. But if you're not doing that, or you're going away from where you could be given maximum value, it's always good to move the needle and get people to assist in that. Have you? You obviously mentioned an email database and things like that. Do you often reach out and ask for feedback, or how do you go about doing that?
I do. When I say often, or when I agree to often, I wouldn't call it on a regular, periodic basis, but I do reach out and just kind of ask for feedback. I don't get a ton that way though. A lot of times I get more feedback from my guests themselves because they're
Yeah,
more willing to come in and do the interview, but listen to the episodes as part of it. And I ask, hey, is there anything you think I should change about the show? Do the questions make sense? Typically, most of the feedback is positive. Sometimes there's some tweaks, or sometimes there's yeah, this question really kind of got me. Maybe you want to prep it a little bit differently or something like that, and that's always really really helpful. But typically, that's where the feedback comes from more easily. And it's kind of interesting because those are the folks I'm also targeting as listeners, is the people I'm interviewing. So it's helpful to kind of have that front row seat when I'm interviewing them too. Just be like, hey,
definitely.
any feedback on the show?
And looking at the industry as a whole, I'll ask you this kind of twice because I'm interested to know about Variable as well. But is there anything in those industries that excites you or might be coming in the future that you're thinking, oh, this is going to be huge?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I look across manufacturing, distribution, supply chain, um, there is a lot going on. There is a movement in the industry, and it's been happening over several years, and it will take several years, but towards total cloud. I say total. Total's a strong word. A bigger cloud presence for solutions and for enterprise systems. More point type solutions than do it do it all type of systems, and more of an ecosystem that connects those systems. So if you look at like the consumer world, or I would say the developer world. We'll say the developer world because I'm an engineer. Everything's pretty integrated. You can essentially plug everything into Slack. You can plug everything else into everything else. You can use Zapier. You can use other sorts of like connector tools to really connect all your workflows and make things work. There are no code tools too for things you just want to sling together quickly or get other people to build for you. And so that integration exists in that world. Doesn't exist for manufacturing and the supply chain. And so what I see is a drift towards that, not a drift, a direct kind of movement towards that, because that is needed. Point solutions, sharing of data, integrations, and the ability to be flexible in how you create your um, to create your operation, right? Your most optimal operation. And I'm really excited about that. We're really excited about that at Variable. We want to be a huge part of that, a huge cornerstone for labor and beyond for that industry and for those solutions. So that's manufacturing. From a podcast standpoint, I'm excited about the growth in podcasts. I am excited about kind of I'm excited about the tooling in podcasting because there's so much opportunity out there right now. If I had all the time in the world, I would probably try to build a podcast solution for hosts that allow you to do a lot more. The workflow tooling around workflow from, scheduling to capturing audio to editing to publishing is still sort of fragmented, and there's not a great tool out there or ecosystem that connects all the tools that you know should be connected in this sort of workflow, in this sort of system. So I'm excited about the opportunity there and what's going to come out of it. I'm also excited about just the growth in the industry as well. It gives podcasts more more spotlight time essentially, or more market. I think on the flip side of that, though, I will say that it does invite some bigger players in with much bigger budgets than I have, that can kind of do a lot more advertising than I can as well. So that is also, it comes with it's kind of a double edged sword there, or I don't know how you say that. It comes with pros and cons.
And do you find with your podcast, you've been able to market yourself and maybe Variable or your past career as well a lot? It's a brilliant marketing tool as a
Oh, I
result.
see. Absolutely. Yes. No, I think that's very true, Tom. It's been helpful. It's been a really helpful networking tool. I've gotten to bring people on the show and then talk shop with them. And, it's been more, I really try to make my guests feel like we're in a coffee shop chatting, like we're having fun, just having a chat, and that makes a really good connection. And I've had people sponsor the show that have been guests that I just randomly reached out to on LinkedIn because I thought their solution was interesting, and it's led to a lot of really cool stuff for the show, but also a lot of really cool stuff for Variable and for my career as a CTO. I've pulled in people's solutions into Variable to use them in our platform, which has been great. I didn't know about the solutions ahead of time, and now I have a front row seat into how it was built and what the plans are and all those sorts of things. So that's pretty cool. It helps me network and be able to ask questions to other folks, and kind of advertise who I am in the space. I'm not making any moves. I'm at Variable. I'm a founder, so I'm the at Variable for the long term. But it's helpful to be known in the space,
Yeah.
and be able to ask questions to like-minded folks that are trying to solve the same problems.
Yeah. Excellent answer. Lastly, Noah, we always ask this last question on the show, which is if you could bottle up one personality trait you have yourself that you could pass on to others, what would it be?
Oh man, what comes to mind is a bunch I don't want to pass on to others. So I think about this with my kids. I don't I don't want them to don't be like this. Don't do as I say, not as I do. Um, let's see. Let me think about that. I think for me, I authentically deal with fear a lot. It's kind of an internal struggle for me in a lot of different areas, but not in the area of building something or creating something or solving a problem. I I don't have fear there, and I get excited about it, and I get excited about the risk of maybe it not working, but we're going to figure out how to make it work, and architecting and just kind of having a blank canvas and putting something together. I don't fear that, and so if I could bottle that up and pass that on to people, that would help them, remove their paralysis of maybe over engineering or fear of imperfection or fear of releasing too early or, fear of just stepping out and trying. I would love to share that. I think that served me pretty well, and I'm grateful to the God above that's given me that.
That's a brilliant answer. Well, a brilliant way to end the show. Noah, thank you so much for being interviewed. If people want to find you, how can they touch base with you?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Tom. If people want to chat with me, LinkedIn's a great spot. My website, noahlabhart.com, if you want to learn a little more about me. If you want to check out Veryable, it's variableops.com. And I'd love to have you check out the show Code Story as well at codestory.co or any podcast directory.
We'll tag it afterwards as well. But yeah, thank you, Noah. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Tom. Really enjoyed it.